Hi and welcome to this video where we will take a look at the game Gukesj against Gawain Jones. The game was played approximately 1 month after the Chennai Olympiad, and Gukesj was riding high after the phenomenal result in Chennai. And already he had crossed the 2700 mark. This game was played at the Spanish Team Championship, and he was facing one of the strongest British grandmasters, Gawain Jones, known for his very ambitious, very attacking style of play, which is also shown in his choice of openings. Gawain Jones is a well-known King's Indian player, but sometimes he also can choose the Grunfeld defense. And in this game, facing the young prodigy, he chose the Grunfeld instead of his usually preferred King's Indian. So let's see how this game went. d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3 and d5. As I mentioned, Jones plays the King's Indian more often than the Grunfeld, but perhaps he was fearing the preparation of Gukesj and chose an opening which is very well known for its counter-attacking chances that it offers, and he perhaps thought that he had his chances on the counter-attack against the leader of the Indian new wave. And what is characteristic now is that Gukesj, of the many lines that White has at his disposal against the Grunfeld, chooses a line that is not considered very critical, and one that aims to get a, let's say, a typical Grunfeld position in the middle game. So he goes knight f3, bishop g7, and now the move e3. Obviously, this cannot be critical as compared to the other moves, especially c takes d5 followed by e4. So e3 castles, and now c takes d5. Now the idea of the move e3 before taking on d5 was that after knight d5, White can go bishop c4 and attack this knight on d5. Now comes an interesting moment. Black has a choice. Should he just take on c3 and after bc3 go c5 with the standard Grunfeld position? Or, or should he play knight b6 and after bishop b3 go c5, so without taking on c3? And in fact, this option, knight b6 and c5, is considered a bit, let's say, more testing of White's setup of e3 and bishop c4. Actually, I have looked at this in quite some depth, and I couldn't really find ways for White to kind of keep the game going, because the lines become very concrete, and Black seems to be able to create very concrete counterplay or just equalize the position straight out. But perhaps Jones was surprised. He could not recall all these forcing lines that are necessary to remember if you play knight b6 and c5, and he went for knight c3, bc3 and c5. It would be the option of the Grunfeld player, like I said, who may have not revised the forcing lines after knight b6, because it just gives a very acceptable, very well, let's say even objectively equal Grunfeld type of position, where play in the middle game would depend more on understanding and choosing the correct plan rather than on memorization of forcing lines. Possibly this was also Gukesh's idea when choosing this line. So now both sides make standard moves, castles, queen c7, Black threatens c takes d4 and to attack that bishop on c4. So queen e2 defends the bishop, knight c6, bishop a3. So the center of e3, d4, c3 is very solid. Yeah, it limits the activity of the Grunfeld bishop on g7, but on the other hand, it also limits the mobility of White's squared bishop. It cannot be developed on the c1 h6 diagonal because the pawn on e3 blocks the way out. So in this line, White often develops the bishop on a3 to attack the pawn on c5. So Black plays b6, defending the pawn, and rook ac1. The rook is often exposed on the long diagonal in the Grunfeld, so White places it on the c file, defending this pawn on c3. So now sometimes d5 is a possibility without the pawn on c3 hanging, and also placing the rook on the same file as the black queen. Bishop b7, completing development. It's worth pointing out that white almost never takes this pawn on c5, dc5, bc5, bishop takes c5, because this wrecks his structure, and the extra pawn on c3 really doesn't give much. It's not really an extra pawn. In this case in particular, it doesn't really also work tactically, because black can go knight a5 and attack the bishop on c5 and the bishop on c4 behind it. So white is not even thinking about that. He goes e4. Well, if white is ambitious, he should take over the center and allow this standard Grunfeld counterplay against the pawn on d4. Knight a5 by Jones. Standard move also in the Grunfeld, attacking this active bishop on c4. Yeah, threatening c takes d4, and the bishop would be attacked, yeah, by the queen too. But generally, black wants to exchange that bishop, so the bishop draws back to d3. And now we come to the critical position in the middle game. The opening finished, both sides are well developed, the position is objectively equal. Black has the standard Grunfeld position with the standard Grunfeld counterplay. However, in this position, Jones chooses the wrong plan. Now, standard move would be the move e6. Yeah, it's a typical move, controlling the d5 square, stopping white's d5, because that square is now controlled twice. Then the rooks will come to d8, to c8, and black will seek to play in the center and on the queen side. Some idea is to take on d4 and plant the knight on c4, even though now that is not really possible, because white has a good control over the c4 square. But that is one of the ideas of placing the knight on a5, fighting for that square on c4. But Jones now chooses a plan that's ambitious, but it happens to backfire, and credit must go to Gukesh, who managed to refute this plan with very aggressive play. So he went bishop h6. So it attacks the rook on c1, but on the other hand, it removes the bishop from the, let's say, typical Grunfeld diagonal, the long diagonal. So bishop h6, attacking the rook on c1, and now after rook b1, now rook ac8. Now we see the idea behind bishop h6. Black got rid of this rook on c1, and after rook c8 he plans to go cd, cd, and then plant a knight on c4, as I was explaining a bit earlier. Planting a knight on c4 is one of black's main ideas in the Grunfeld, as a way of initiating play on the queen side. So now Gukesh understands that black threatens to take and plant the knight on c4, and he goes d5, immediately stopping black's idea. So with the first phase, or the first idea of the plan with bishop h6 being thwarted, now Jones reverts to the, let's say, one of the main ideas of the Grunfeld, which is an attack on white's center. So he goes e6, undermining and attacking the pawn on d5, c4, and now rook ce8, covering the e pawn, placing the rook on the same file as the queen, and intending the next move, as we shall see. So Gukesh removes the queen from the sensitive e file, and now f5. So now we see the Grunfeld, again, the ideas of the Grunfeld clearly shown in black's play. So attacking white's center, the pawns on d5 and on e4. This undermining is typical for the Grunfeld. Here we see it happening on the light squares on e4 and d5. Usually it happens on the dark squares with the pawn on c5 attacking this pawn on d4. However, the problem with black's plan is that after rook fe1, which strengthens the pawn on e4, what happens is that white is actually better prepared for the opening of the play in the center. And the key factor here will be the weakening of the black king. It appears to me that Jones underestimated this fact. Here he still could have played a move like bishop g7, placing the bishop on the legitimate, in the Grunfeld long diagonal, and being a bit more careful with the king by not opening the game early on. But he shows some impatience and goes for the immediate f takes e4. And what I would like to draw your attention to here now is to notice how energetic Gukesh is in punishing this premature opening of the position. So bishop takes e4, e takes d5, c takes d5, and bishop c8. So the bishop on b7 really doesn't have any prospects, because the bishop on d5 is the pawn on d5 is protected. So it's moved to c8, maybe intending bishop f5 to exchange this bishop on e4. Note that an endgame would be good for black, because this pawn can easily, the passed d5 pawn can be easily blockaded, whereas black has a very strong majority of 3 pawns against 1 on the queen side. But to survive to the endgame is a difficult task, especially after Gukesh's next move, d6. A great move, immediately sacrificing the passed pawn, but opening the floodgates, as they say, towards the black king. Queen takes d6, rook bd1. Now all the pieces are involved in the attack. Queen c7, bishop d5 check. There is no covering, so the king must go to h8, bishop b2. Look how all the pieces are involved in the attack. So the queen can come to c3, the knight can come to g5, the rooks are centralized. All the pieces are involved in the attack, while at the same time black is playing without this knight on a5. Very often in the Grunfeld, when the games are lost by an attack on the king side, the main reason why this attack works is that black is playing with an outward knight on a5. Classical example on this team is the game Spassky-Fischer from the Indian Olympiad 1970, where Fischer lost in similar fashion, being mated on the king side when his knight not on a5, the knight was on c4 in that game, but it was still sidelined and basically left out of play even on c4. Spassky managed to create a decisive attack on the king side. Bishop g7, the only move, and now knight g5. So very forcing, very aggressive, very powerful display of attacking play by Gukesh. What I find really striking in this example is how he uses literally all his pieces in the attack. The knight on g5 now, they're introducing these threats of knight f7, and the rook, then rook to f7 is not possible because the rook on e8 is hanging. Perhaps what Jones was hoping on this move, bishop f5, attacking the queen. Yeah? But now comes the star move in this game, and the reason why I chose it. Perhaps you may want to think about it, what white can play here. And the move is really fantastic. Queen c3, an incredible move. Yeah, the queen just moves one square ahead, offering to be taken by the bishop. But to show you the beauty of the combination, I will just show you the forcing and mating variation that Gukesh undoubtedly saw when sacrificing the queen like this. So what happens if black takes the queen? Bishop takes c3, bishop takes c3 check. It's basically mate, so black must play queen g7, yeah, to cover the check, and now black would be super happy if white just takes on g7, king g7, and well, black would be a pawn up and probably winning. But there is rook e8, yeah, and now the beautiful, very beautiful mating combination, mating variation goes after queen c3. Black is a queen up, but look what happens. Rook takes f8 check, king g7, rook f7 check, king must go to h6 because going to h8 is an immediate mate after rook h7. So king h6 and now h4, threatening mate on h7. Only move to avoid it, go forward with the king h5. And now everything is forced. Check on h7, king g4, check on f3, king f4, g3 check, king e5, rook d5 check, king f6, and rook f7 mate. Fantastic, yeah, really, really amazing. I'm pretty sure Gukesh was very happy when he saw this, when calculating queen c3, and must have felt very content to be able to play a move like this. And just to show you a side variation, a kind of a prosaic one, after rook e8, if black does not take the bishop on c3 and it goes just simply rook e8, then knight f7 check, king g8, knight d6 check, sorry, and after bishop e6, bishop g7, the rook is attacked and white will emerge a clear piece up at least. So that's the prosaic variation. Obviously the nice one is queen c3. So Jones also saw this, obviously, and he went rook e1, yeah. And now, unfortunately for him, again, bishop c3 leads to mate. Bishop takes c3, queen g7, rook e7. Another amazing move, yeah. We will see the same idea in the game. The point being, queen c3, rook h7 is a pretty mate. The king cannot escape. He went h6 instead of bishop c3, but Gukesh executed the same combination. Queen g7, and rook e7. The queen is attacked, and of course, queen takes b2, rook h7 is a mate. A fantastic game, fantastic attack, crowned by this very, very beautiful combination by Gukesh. And I think, okay, one more demonstration of his fantastic talent, in this case shown an attacking talent, precise calculation, and also a very strong feeling for the initiative. He sensed that this plan that black played, e6 f5, was probably risky, but then all it was necessary was this premature opening of the position by Jones, by taking on e4, opening the position, and that was all it took. From that moment onwards, with a very strong killer instinct, Gukesh went for the throat and executed just impeccably. So, a very beautiful game. Hope you enjoyed the presentation. And yeah, thanks for watching this video. See you again soon.